The flashbulbs exploded outside the fashion show, where Elon Musk's teenage daughter, Aurora, stepped out of the limo with the kind of grace that could stop traffic. Dressed in a sleek silver dress and hair styled to perfection by a celebrity stylist, she moved through the crowd like she was born for this. Photographers shouted her name, influencers clung to her arms, and social media accounts buzzed with every angle of her outfit. Just 16, Aurora Musk had become a sudden sensation, half because of her last name and half because of her stunning looks and magnetic charm. But behind that perfect facade was something her father noticed long before the rest of the world caught on. Aurora wasn't smiling anymore. Not the way she used to when she'd sit on his lap and tell him about constellations she made up herself. That sparkle had dimmed, replaced by a constant pressure to look flawless, act flawless, be flawless. She'd become obsessed with her appearance. Her reflection had turned into a source of anxiety. If a single strand of hair was out of place or a pimple dared to appear, it sent her into spirals. And Elon, who had witnessed society's dark obsession with image and validation, saw his daughter losing herself right in front of him. He remembered the moment clearly. Aurora had burst into tears one afternoon because a friend had posted a candid dump photo where her hair looked puffy. She wasn't worried about her grades or her dreams of building robots anymore, only filters, likes, and approval. Her room was full of designer skincare products and magazines that told her how to be more beautiful. Her conversations, once filled with imagination and questions about Mars, had become dominated by selfies and online drama. Elon had tried talking to her, tried explaining how these things didn't define her. But she rolled her eyes like most teenagers do, thinking her father just didn't get it. But Elon did get it. He saw how the world preyed on young women, how it built them up with artificial standards only to tear them down. And watching it happen to his own daughter, who once believed beauty was building something meaningful, broke something inside him. He knew she needed a jolt, something to pull her out of the fantasy before it swallowed her whole. And so he made a decision that would leave everyone speechless. It started on a quiet Sunday morning. Aurora was eating avocado toast at the kitchen island, scrolling through her phone, checking how many people had liked her latest selfie. Elon walked in calmly, sat down across from her, and asked her to talk. She barely looked up, nodding along while absorbed in her screen. He mentioned something about beauty and the way the world defines it, but she mumbled something dismissive. He paused for a moment, then stood up, walked to the drawer, and pulled out a hair clipper. Aurora laughed, thinking he was joking. But Elon's face didn't change, and in one deliberate motion he turned on the clippers. She froze. The humming sound filled the kitchen. "Dad, stop." "That's not funny." He didn't say a word. He stepped behind her, rested his hand on her shoulder gently, and then, without hesitation, began to shave off the first long lock of her golden hair. She screamed. The chair scraped backward as she stood up in disbelief, covering her head with trembling hands. Her eyes widened in horror as she saw the clump of hair in her father's hand. The once vibrant kitchen turned into a battlefield of emotion. The man she admired, the tech icon the world worshipped, had just crossed a line she never thought possible. But Elon's face wasn't angry. It was heartbreakingly calm. He didn't do it out of rage or punishment. He did it out of necessity. She ran to her room, slamming the door, sobbing behind it. Elon didn't chase her. He sat back down, clippers still in hand, and stared at the strands of hair on the floor like they were ashes from something sacred. It wasn't about destroying her image. It was about breaking the illusion. He knew she would hate him. For a while. Maybe longer. But he also knew something Aurora didn't yet realize. That everything she thought made her valuable was as fragile as a filter. And if he didn't shatter that illusion now, the world eventually would. Harsher. Colder. Crueler. What Elon had just done wasn't the end of their bond. It was the beginning of a lesson that would change her forever. The silence in the Musk mansion that evening was louder than any explosion. Aurora's bedroom door remained closed for hours, while Elon sat quietly downstairs, replaying what had just happened in his mind. He wasn't a man who second-guessed his actions. He built rockets that carried the hopes of humanity. But this was different. This wasn't about logic or data. This was about a fragile heart that had been fed illusions and now stood exposed to the raw truth. Upstairs, Aurora stared at her reflection in horror. Her once flowing blonde hair now had a harsh, uneven bald streak running across the top of her scalp. She couldn't stop shaking. The girl who had once commanded the spotlight, who had been praised for her flawless looks, now felt like a stranger to herself. Her first instinct was to hide. Her second was to fight. Rage bubbled inside her, raw and volcanic. How could he do this? How could Elon Musk, the man who once read her bedtime stories about dreaming big and being herself, now humiliate her like this? She picked up her phone, frantically texting her friends, desperate for comfort. But even in their sympathy there was shock, confusion, judgment. The same people who had praised her beauty now barely knew what to say. In the days that followed, the media storm hit fast. Rumors leaked. Someone close had whispered about what happened, and suddenly headlines appeared. Elon Musk shaves daughter's hair in shocking family drama. Beauty and the billionaire. Did Elon go too far? Photographers tried catching glimpses of Aurora as she avoided public places entirely. Her schoolmates buzzed with gossip, some supportive, others cruel. Whispers followed her like shadows. Even her closest friends pulled away slightly, unsure how to respond to a girl who was no longer the Instagram-perfect icon she once was. At home, the tension grew thick. Aurora refused to eat dinner with Elon. She wouldn't speak to him, wouldn't even look him in the eyes. The only sound from her was the occasional soft sob through her closed bedroom door. Grimes, Aurora's mother and Elon's former partner, called in disbelief, her voice sharp with concern. But Elon remained composed, even as the world questioned his decision. Because deep inside, he knew something else was beginning to stir. Beneath Aurora's grief. A few days later, Aurora stood before the bathroom mirror, scissors in hand. She took a deep breath, looked into her tear-stained face, and then, slowly, began trimming what remained of her hair. This time, it was her choice. Not out of rebellion, but out of control. For the first time in months, she wasn't thinking about how others would see her, only how she saw herself. The cuts were uneven, the mirror fogged with tears, but with every strand that fell, a piece of the pressure dropped with it. Meanwhile, Elon waited. Not with more lessons, not with explanations, but with space. He didn't storm into her room demanding forgiveness. He didn't defend himself online. He simply stayed nearby, ready for the moment her pain turned into curiosity, because he knew it would. And one morning, that moment came. Aurora walked into the garage, barefoot, dressed in a hoodie that swallowed her frame. Elon was working quietly, on a new prototype, surrounded by wires and blueprints. She stood silently at the entrance for a moment, then walked up to him and placed something on the table. It was her phone. She had deleted all her social media accounts. Elon looked at the phone, then at her, saying nothing. Her face was tired, puffy, but calmer. The silence between them shifted. Less cold, more thoughtful. There were no lectures, no apologies. Just a quiet understanding that something had cracked open inside her, something neither of them could fully name yet, but it was a beginning. A beginning that hurt like hell, yes, but one that might save her from the prison of appearances she'd been unknowingly locked in. And Elon knew that was just the start. Aurora stopped looking in the mirror for a while. The sharp angles of her cheekbones, once meticulously contoured, now stood bare under soft, untouched skin. Her newly shaved head was awkward at first, foreign and cold. But as the days passed, something unexpected happened. She didn't hate it. She didn't like it either, not yet, but she didn't flinch when she passed a reflection. She stopped adjusting her hoodie to hide her face. She stopped wondering what people online would say if they saw her now. Because they couldn't. She had taken herself offline. Deleted everything. Gone dark. In the silence that followed, something even more powerful began to take root. Clarity. With no selfies to take, no comments to obsess over, no photos to edit, Aurora found herself sitting alone with her own thoughts. For the first time in what felt like years. At first it was terrifying. She didn't know who she was without the applause, without the filters, without the attention. But as the stillness settled, she realized she had time again. Time to think, to breathe, to create. Elon watched her from a distance, carefully. Not as the billionaire innovator, but as a father walking on emotional eggshells. He knew she was in the fragile space between who she used to be and who she might become. He didn't want to push, but one evening, as they sat in the garden, no cameras, no noise, just two lawn chairs under a slowly setting sky, she finally asked the question, "Why did you do it?" Her voice was soft, not angry anymore, just worn out. And Elon answered, the only way he could, by telling her about the time he got lost chasing approval. Not in mirrors, but in boardrooms. How he let the world's validation steer his life until he didn't recognize himself. How it nearly cost him his peace. And how, when he saw her obsessing over her appearance, valuing herself only by what strangers thought, he saw the same pattern forming, but younger, more dangerous. He told her he didn't want her to unlearn self-worth at 40. He wanted her to remember it at 16. Aurora didn't cry. She just stared ahead at the sky, lips pressed together, processing it all. The next morning she walked back into the garage, where he often tinkered. She asked him to teach her something, not how to model, not how to pose, but how to build. Elon paused, then nodded. What followed was unlike anything she'd experienced. No cameras, no one watching. Just her and her father, soldering wires and sketching ideas. The machines didn't care how she looked. The metal didn't judge. It only responded to how she used her mind and hands. She started with small tasks, assembling circuit boards, designing simple robot arms, but something inside her clicked. She wasn't doing it to impress anyone. She was doing it because she loved it. Elon saw her light coming back piece by piece, not as the girl who got compliments for her hair, but as the young woman who used to stay up late as a kid building solar-powered Lego cars. That spark had returned, and it wasn't tied to validation anymore. It was tied to purpose. At school, Aurora returned quietly. Heads turned, of course. Whispers followed her again, but she no longer cared in the same way. She had nothing to prove. Some people mocked her look. Others admired her bravery. But to her, their opinions had become background noise. She wore her bald head like armor, not as a statement, but as evidence that she had survived something deeper than anyone could see. The mirror wasn't the enemy anymore, because now, when she looked into it, she didn't see flaws. She saw freedom. Weeks passed, and the mansion that once echoed with Aurora's frustration now hummed with quiet curiosity and newfound rhythm. Her mornings were no longer spent aligning makeup routines with trending beauty hacks, but instead organizing notes, researching circuits, and sketching ideas in a notebook smudged with pencil marks and ambition. Something had shifted, not just in her environment, but in her identity. She wasn't trying to be perfect anymore. She was trying to be real. Elon never said it out loud, but his pride swelled each time he watched her work. There was a quiet intensity in her now. One night, she stayed up until 3 a.m. in the garage, trying to fix a malfunctioning robotic hand that wouldn't respond to input. When she finally got it to grasp a pencil, she didn't shout with excitement. She just smiled to herself, a private smile, the kind that doesn't need to be shared to matter. Still, it wasn't all smooth sailing. Aurora wasn't immune to the temptations of her past life. There were moments when she reached for her phone, her fingers hesitating over the blank screen of an app she no longer had. Moments when she saw other girls online, still living that life of filtered glamour, and felt a brief pang of envy. But those moments faded faster now. She could recognize them for what they were: traps, carefully designed illusions that promised happiness but delivered emptiness. Then came the school's annual tech fair. Aurora had never participated before. She had always been the girl who took selfies with the winners, not the one soldering components and competing for recognition in STEM. But this year was different. She signed up quietly, didn't tell anyone, and worked on her project late into the nights. It was a device that used minimal components to convert ambient noise into small pulses of electricity. Simple, efficient, and incredibly practical. It didn't look flashy. It wasn't shiny or trendy, but it worked. And she'd built it with her own hands. When the day of the fair arrived, she stood behind her modest little table wearing a plain black hoodie and no makeup. Her hair hadn't grown back much. It was barely a soft fuzz across her scalp. But it didn't matter. The Aurora who once obsessed over angles and lighting now stood confidently under fluorescent lights, explaining micro-resonance theory to a panel of judges. Students passed by, many of them double-taking as they recognized her. Some whispered, others stared, but no one could deny what they were seeing. She wasn't a symbol of fallen popularity anymore. She was becoming something more dangerous to those who didn't understand her. Authentic, Elon stood at the back of the room, watching her with his arms crossed. He wasn't there as a billionaire or a public figure. He was just a father who had once risked his daughter's trust to save her from something that nearly consumed her. And as he watched her explaining her project to the judges with calm authority and intellectual confidence, he knew he hadn't failed her. He had given her the one thing social media never could: substance. She didn't win first place, but she didn't need to. One of the judges, a visiting MIT professor, approached her afterward and handed her a card, told her she had a natural intuition, and asked if she'd ever considered applying to their early entry engineering mentorship program. Aurora stared at the card for a long time. Then she smiled. Not for the cameras, not for anyone watching, just for herself. Because in that moment she realized something profound. Her beauty had once been her currency, but now her mind was. And no one, not even the algorithms, could ever take that from her. The buzz around Aurora's transformation spread quietly at first, like a whisper in hallways and teacher lounges. But after the tech fair, something changed. Her name was no longer being murmured in pity or mockery. It was being mentioned with curiosity, even respect. Her story, without even trying to go viral, was beginning to inspire others. A few younger girls approached her in school, asking about her project. One even confessed that she'd deleted Instagram after watching how Aurora had changed. Aurora had never set out to be a role model, but the world was starting to see her as one. Still, the biggest surprise came when she was called to the front office one Thursday afternoon. She walked down the sterile hallway of her private school expecting to be handed paperwork or a message from her father's assistant. But when she stepped into the lobby, her heart nearly stopped. Standing there was someone she hadn't seen in over a year: her older cousin, Lexi. Lexi had once been Aurora's idol, a former model who had conquered social media fame, turned fashion influencer, and moved to LA. She had millions of followers, brand deals, and a lifestyle that Aurora had desperately wanted to emulate just a year earlier. The last time they spoke, Lexi had gently mocked Aurora's awkwardness and encouraged her to get on brand if she ever wanted to make it. But this time, Lexi didn't look like the perfect goddess from the photos. Her hair was shorter, her makeup faded, and there was something tired behind her bright blue eyes. After a long pause, she smiled faintly. "Can we talk?" They went to a quiet cafe near campus. Aurora, still unsure why Lexi had come, listened as her cousin opened up in a way she never had before. Lexi had hit a breaking point. The constant pressure to be flawless, to maintain her image, had drained her. She'd been in a cycle of fake friendships, brand obligations, anxiety attacks, and exhaustion. Everything that once felt empowering, being seen, being admired, had turned into a prison. And then, she saw Aurora's story. Through whispers, through mutual friends, even through a few screenshots of the tech fair. I watched you disappear from the world everyone's chasing, and come back stronger. I don't think you realize how rare that is. Aurora didn't know what to say at first. Her cousin, the woman who once symbolized everything she thought she wanted, was now sitting across from her, visibly broken by the very life Aurora had once idolized. It felt like seeing a ghost of the path she had almost taken. Lexi reached across the table and gently touched Aurora's hand. You were the first Musk girl to walk away from the image, and now I think I need to do the same. That night, Aurora sat on the roof of her home, legs folded, staring at the stars, the way she used to when she was little. Elon joined her after a while, quietly handing her a blanket and sitting beside her in silence. I saw Lexi today, she said softly, her breath fogging in the cool air. Elon didn't respond. He waited. She's done pretending. She wants to be real again. He turned his head slowly toward her. And what about you? Aurora let the silence stretch for a long time. Then she looked down at her hands. Steady now, no longer trembling from nerves or fear. I'm already real. Finally. In the background, one of the robots she'd been building flickered to life. It was nothing special, just a small rover that followed light sources. But it worked. It moved forward. Just like her. And for the first time in a long while, Elon smiled. Not as a father proud of his daughter's achievements, but as a man relieved that his most difficult decision had become his most meaningful one. The moment. He'd shaved her hair. He hadn't known for sure if it would work. He only knew that he couldn't stand by and let the world decide her value. But now he saw it clearly. She was becoming unstoppable. Weeks turned into months, and the world kept spinning, unaware of the quiet revolution unfolding within Aurora Musk. Her hair began to grow back slowly, short tufts that framed her face without apology or effort. But she didn't rush to style. It didn't bother with salon appointments or product sponsorships. For the first time in her life, she no longer viewed her reflection as a measure of her worth. It was just her face, just a part of her. The real beauty now lived in what couldn't be seen. She dove deeper into robotics and design, working alongside engineers who treated her not as a celebrity's daughter, but as a curious mind with good ideas. She asked better questions, challenged assumptions, and even began mentoring younger girls at school who were afraid to enter STEM spaces because of how they looked or what people would say. Every now and then, she would receive messages from her old life. Friends, from the influencer circle reaching out to ask how she handled the backlash, or how she found the courage to just let go. Some of them asked if the pain was worth it. She always answered the same way. It hurt like hell. But what I found on the other side? That was worth everything. The media eventually moved on. Other headlines, other scandals, other daughters of billionaires trying to chase the spotlight she had once abandoned. But Aurora no longer chased anything external. She was building her own path now, one wire and idea at a time. Then came the day she stood on stage at a TEDx youth event, not because she wanted followers, not to relaunch an image, but because someone on the MIT mentorship board had suggested it. She walked onto the stage in simple jeans, a plain t-shirt, and her new short hair cropped just below her ears. There were no lights designed to flatter her, no filters to smooth out the truth. Just her, a mic, and a story to tell. She didn't talk about technology at first. She talked about the day her father shaved her hair, the confusion, the pain, the rage. And then she talked about what came after, the discomfort, the silence, the rebuilding, the mirror she used to fear, and the girl she rediscovered behind it. Her voice never wavered. It was steady, strong, measured, not performative, but real. She ended the talk with no dramatic music, no thunderous applause demanded. Just a single line, simple and unforgettable. The world convinced me that beauty would open all the doors I wanted. But it turns out, those doors were empty rooms. What I really needed was a reason to build new ones. The audience rose slowly, not out of obligation, but out of awe. Not because she had dazzled them, but because she had moved them. Elon, sitting in the third row, didn't clap louder than the rest. He didn't need to. His eyes said everything. They held the quiet satisfaction of a man who had once chosen heartbreak over comfort, and now saw the reason why. That night, back at home, Aurora placed a small frame on her desk. Inside wasn't a photo, but the lock of hair her father had, first shaved off, preserved behind glass, not as a symbol of loss, but as a reminder that sometimes, to become who you truly are, you have to let go of who the world told you to be. And while others continued to chase image, chase approval, chase illusion, Aurora Musk had already discovered the truth, because the most important lesson her father ever taught her wasn't about beauty. It was about freedom, and she would never forget it.